Okay, welcome back to part 2 here of chord structure, how a chord is made. And as if you saw lesson number 1, you saw that basically we make up chords out of the major scale. Okay, that's where they come from, is out of the major scale. Okay, and everything's referenced back to the major scale. And we found out last time that a major chord is basically the first, third, and fifth note of the major scale. You can look at it that it skips. Okay, we just skip a note, boom, skip a note, boom, 1, 3, 5. And we designate them numerically by 1, 3, and 5. Numbers are very important when we're trying to study music theory, because we use the major scale and we number each of the notes of the major scale, 1 through 8. And that is where we get all the references to any number that's identified in a chord, like a D7, when you hear a 7th or a 13th or a sus4. Those numbers are representative of the number that is in the major scale of the particular chord we're talking about. Okay, so that's why the major scale is important, because that's where chords come from. And that's why the major scale is important, because that's where we get the numbers of any chord, or any reference to a number is referencing back to the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I hope that helps you a little bit. Okay, so last time we looked at the major chord is a 1, 3, and a 5. Okay, and I says there's only one thing that changes if you're going to make a minor chord. Okay, if you're making a minor chord, the only thing that changes is that we flatten the third. Okay, we flatten the third, and that would be this note. So a major chord is a 1, 3, and a 5. A minor chord is a 1 flat 3. We just flatten that note by a half step. We lower the pitch 1/2 step. On the guitar, it's 1 fret lower in pitch. I'm trying to make it as clear as possible. We flatten the third, and that's it. This stays the same. So we have a 1, a flat 3, and a 5. So it'd be a 1, flat 3, and a 5 equals a minor chord. Okay, and let me rewrite this up here, so that a major chord, the only difference is it's a 1, a 3, and a 5 is major. I guess I'm going to leave that. I'm writing sideways, so 1, 3, and 5. Okay, so now you're going to find that all this came from the major scale. Okay, that's how it was created. Okay, off of the major scale. And now, so if you ever wondered where your chords come from, they come from the major scale. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the next chord that shows up would be a flat 7 or a dominant 7th chord, like a D7. We all have seen a D7 on the, or played the open chord D7, you know. Okay, so boom, boom, boom. Okay, there's your D7 chord. Okay, and you've seen that, you've played it. Okay, and so you know that all we do to make a D7 chord is we add, guess what? The 7th note. That's it. You add the 7th note of the major scale to the 1, 3, 5, and I got the triad drawn out here. You skip a note, boom, you add a 7th, but you flatten it. That's the rule. That's the thing that you got to remember. Just like gravity, just like any other rule, you see a red light, you got to stop. If you're going to make a dominant 7th chord, the rule is you skip a chord, but it's going to be a flatted 7th. And that's what gives you the D7 sound, that blues jazzy sound. Okay, that's how a 7th chord is made. Okay, so to make a 7th chord is basically a 1, a 3, a 5, and a flat 7 equals a dominant, we call it dominant 7th. Now after that, if you wanted to make it a major 7th, which is a very pretty sounding chord if you get a chance to play one, a D dominant 7th basically is that note, and just take this one out. Okay, notice that changed, and that's telling you that's the 7th note. It's just basically a 7th. Okay, so you just add a 7th note, and you don't flatten it. You play that, and it sounds very nice. It's a very nice, beautiful, open, airy chord. America used it in a couple of their songs, so it's a very beautiful sounding chord. Chicago used it in Color My World, dominant 7ths. Very nice. Okay, so that's how you get a dominant, a major 7th. So 1, 3, 5, and just a regular 7th, not a flattened one, is equals a major 7th. Okay, major 7th chord. And guess what? We're going to make a 9th. How do you make a 9th chord? Okay, you played a D9 before, C9. There's a lot of ways to finger it. But to make a 9th chord, guess what you have to do? Now, I think you're kind of getting the hang of how this works. We got to add the 9th note. Okay, so what is the 9th note? Because we only go to 8. Well, guess what? If we continued counting instead of starting over with 8 and saying it begins again, we just count the 8 as a 1, because it could be identified sometimes as an 8, dependent if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or now it can become the 1 because it's a C. A C can be a 1, so then we can go, or we can continue on with it. So we can call it 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. Okay, so how do you add a 9th? Guess what? You skip a note. That's all you do. Boom. There's your 9. So to make a 9th chord, all you do is add a 1, a 3, a 5, and a flat 7, and a 9, which is a D. Okay, so that's how you would make a 9th chord. Okay, how do you make 11th chord? This is a tough one, isn't it? No, it isn't. Skip a chord, skip a note, boom, you add the 11th. So you add 11th, and then you get a 11th chord. Okay, well, how about a 13th? That's another tough one. No, it ain't. Skip a note, you got a 13th. So you see, skipping a note was the principle they used all the way through to get the different chords that we know and that we've heard of. 7ths, 9ths, 11ths. Okay, and so you can see that's the principle they used all the way through to develop these chords. So it's really not that complicated if you kind of understand what they did. Okay, let's see, just some other quick things, just so you understand that a 2, let's go ahead and continue with this. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, A 2 and a 9 is the same thing. Okay, the second note of the major scale, C, D, could either be designated as the second note, or if we're continuing on, as a 9th note. So 2 and 9 are the same. So you don't have to count all the way out to 9 to figure out what the 9th note is. It's just the second note, which makes it very easy to figure out, because if your first note is C, the second note is D, that's your second note or your 9th note. So they share the same quality. Okay, a 4 and an 11 are the same. So you count 4 notes out of do, re, mi, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's an F. That's the same as an 11th. Okay, so you don't have to count out 11 notes past 8 to figure out how do I make an 11th chord. You just count the 4th one, and it's the same as 11. And 6 and 13. So 4 and 11, 6 and 13, they're the same note, okay? So your 6th note and your 13th note is an A in this particular case, and that will give you a 13th note, okay? And to make a 13th, you just add, I don't know if I mentioned that, but it's a guess. It's a 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 13. Excuse me. 9 and 13. Okay? So that's how you make a 13th chord. You would make sure those notes are part of it. And you're going to find, I would suggest going to a chord book to get how to finger these particular chords, because sometimes they'll eliminate a 7th because we just don't have enough fingers to do all this. So wisdom brought out that to get a 13th sound, you don't necessarily have to have all the other notes in there. So we eliminate some of them, okay? So you're not always playing every single note to get a 13th chord, and that would show up as, you know, a third. Okay? So don't get confused with that when that comes up. But basically, you're skipping notes. We call them, we're adding a third, because it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we're adding thirds to get our various chords that show up. Just real quickly, 2 other popular chords is an augmented chord. You've probably heard of that. Whoa, boy, that sounds complicated. Augmented. Okay. Basically, it's a 1, 3, and a sharp 5. That's all it is. And a diminished chord, okay, is basically a 1, a flat 3, and a flat 5. Bingo. That's it. That's all you got to do to make up a diminished chord. It's got to contain those 3 characteristics. So I hope this was helpful to you, that you understand that chords came from the major scale. That's basically how it works. The major scale started off. The do, re, mi scale is what our music is based on. It's what our scales are based on or reference back to. It's the Rosetta Stone of music, and it is basically what our chords come from and reference back to with these numbers. Anytime you see a number, it goes back to the major scale, the do, re, mi scale. So I hope that was helpful, and that's basically it. Use that knowledge to grow as a musician, to be able to figure out chords. There's a whole lot more. We're just scratching the surface of what you can learn with music and how it relates to the guitar. We haven't even related it physically to a guitar yet, but that's what I do in my classes, is I show them how you can find ways to find these chords very easily by different shapes all up and down the neck. So there's a lot of things that can really be helpful to you in composing music, figuring out a chord, constructing a chord on your own, just using this knowledge versus having a book. But using your guitar and this knowledge, you can figure out how to play almost any chord there is. Okay, and there's a lot more than one way to play a chord. Just get that fact out also. There's more than one way to play a chord. There's so many fingerings. There's books that got hundreds of pages of diagrams of how you can play different types of chords and how to play the same chord different ways. So don't get confused. Well, one guy's playing it this way, another guy's playing it that way. There's another thing that that we discussed called inversions. What is an inversion? And that's voicing of a particular chord, whether the root of the chord is in the bass, in the bass note. That's how we normally play the root note, C. If we're playing a C chord, the C is in the bass. It's the bass note. It's the lowest note that we play. And we like that, and we're comfortable with that. But the first inversion is basically putting the third in the bass. So the E becomes the bass note, and it sounds totally different. But if it's C, E, G, it's a C chord. But it sounds different because this one is being played first. So the order of how we hear the notes makes it sound different and changes you know, the flavor, the coloring of the chord. And the next inversion, the second inversion, is when we put the fifth in the bass. So now we got a G starting off with the bass note, and then we play an E and a C as the higher pitch notes, and it sounds totally different, but it's a C chord because it has a C, E, and a G. So there's a lot of flavors, a lot of colors that we can do with music, a lot we can do with what we have here, and that's what musicians over the years have done, has used the major scale to give us all the colors of the rainbow. And we haven't even really talked about sharps and flats yet. Well, we did talk about one flat, the flatted 7, but you know, there's 12 notes in music, that's all there is, and we have to add sharps and flats to all these when we start changing keys. Right now we just discussed the key of C and the chord C, and the major scale C, but there's 12 total keys that we can discuss, that each one has their own peculiarity, but there's ways to simplify all that as we study music together. So God bless you. Thanks for watching EdsGuitarLessons.com. I hope this was helpful to you, and see you next time around. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.